Hi everyone, it's Katrina.
Number 10. Eridu, the first city. Among the most ancient ruins in all of Mesopotamia is a city called Eridu. This place was considered to be the very first city in the world by the ancient Sumerians. It was founded in roughly 5400 BC and was believed to have been created by the gods themselves. The Sumerians believed that when the great gods descended from heaven, they built Eridu from stone and allowed the humans of Earth to occupy it. The later kingdoms that would rise in Mesopotamia looked back at the city of Eridu as being from a kind of lost golden age, like how we look back today at the Garden of Eden as a mythical paradise. The city was ultimately abandoned in 600 BC and has continued to deteriorate since then. But the really mysterious part of Eridu is the theory about it being created by the gods. There are a lot of fringe theories surrounding what this may have meant. Was it literal or metaphorical? Did the Sumerians think of their first kings as godly figures, or did they really believe a mysterious group of deities came down from the sky to build the first city on Earth? If you were to ask an archaeologist, they would say it's all just myth and legend. However, some believe the first great city on our planet was indeed created by a group of intelligent beings who came down from the sky. These beings supposedly helped primitive, barbaric-like humans to form the first complex society, then took off back to the stars. It was with their help that the first city was born, and that Mesopotamia turned into the cradle of civilization. Of course, it's just a theory. Number 9. Egyptian head cones. Ancient Egyptians between the years 1550 BC and 30 BC wore extraordinarily strange cones on their heads. Plenty of Egyptian art from between these years shows people wearing what almost looked like dunce caps. They were pointy cone hats, as if they had traffic pylons attached to their craniums. But because not a single physical example of one of these cones was ever found, archaeologists always wondered if they really did exist, or if they had only been an artistic style. Finally, 2 head cones have been found, marking a historical first. The cones were discovered on the skulls of 2 unknown individuals who were buried at the site of Amarna in Egypt 3,300 years ago. The cones were made of wax, were almost completely disintegrated, but they were preserved enough to show that yes, the ancient Egyptians really did wear these weird hats. Now here's something that might seem totally unrelated, but could in fact be a major revelation. We have to go back to the Anunnaki and the Ubaid figurines. These figurines of strange reptilian beings had cone-shaped heads. The figurines were always sculpted with the backs of the heads looking like upside-down ice cream cones. Some believe that the influence of these mysterious reptilian overlords continued for thousands of years after they left. The ancient Egyptians who wore bizarre cones on their heads may have been trying to mimic the reptilian humanoids that came thousands of years before them. This may have lasted until around 2,000 years ago, when people finally started to forget about the reptilians who had allegedly come down from the stars to jumpstart humanity. Then again, the weird cones could have just been a phase like stove-top hats or beaver pelt hats. Number 8. The first engineers. When we think about the greatest ancient architects in human history, we usually turn to Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Rome. But some of the greatest early engineers operated in North America. America's first sophisticated engineers were Native Americans living in northern Louisiana 3,000 years ago. At the same time Egyptians were putting wax cones on their heads, Native Americans were designing complicated cities, practicing farming, and living a near-modern lifestyle. Scientists from Washington University in St. Louis recently did some digging into the ancient Native American culture that lived along the Mississippi River. They found that the early indigenous people were highly skilled engineers and could build positively gargantuan structures within just a couple of weeks. The biggest difference between the Native Americans and the Egyptians is that those in the Western Hemisphere built their structures out of earth and mud. The Egyptians built their marvels out of stone, which is why they have survived for thousands of years. But surprisingly, the monuments in America have stood the test of time as well, more or less. These university students recently looked at earthworks that have been standing for 3,000 years. Take the Poverty Point World Heritage Site as an example. It boasts a 72-foot-tall earth mound and a surrounding area of lumps that are thought to have been homes and buildings. These things all go back 3,400 years and were done with extremely primitive instruments. Unfortunately, we don't really know what happened to these indigenous people. They appear to have abandoned their great cities and allowed the earth mounds to slowly melt back into the mud. We don't know if they had gotten their inspiration for these marvelous building projects from the intergalactic travelers, or if they were just really clever. Number 7. The Ubaid Reptilians. The city of Eridu was built during the Ubaid period, a time in Mesopotamian prehistory that lasted from between 5500 BC to 3900 BC. It was during this time that the prehistoric people of ancient Mesopotamia began sculpting strange lizard models known as the Ubaid figurines. These small sculptures were formed in the likeness of humanoid reptiles. They looked like creatures with bodies like ordinary men and women, but with heads like lizards. The largest bulk of these figurines were found by archaeologist Harry Reginald Hall in 1919. They were discovered at the site of Al-Ubaid, which was a city just as ancient as Eridu. While there is no real explanation for why they were made, there is one strange theory that scientists refuse to discuss, and it has to do with the group of reptilian beings known as the Anunnaki. Like we talked about before, there is a possibility that beings greater and more intelligent than us came down from the stars at the beginning of civilization. These beings are said to have given humans great knowledge, helped build the first cities, and were looked upon as gods. But also keep in mind that the Anunnaki were a real pantheon of gods, but modern sci-fi theories have changed them. The Ubaid figurines appear to be miniature recreations of what these Anunnaki creatures/gods looked like. They were reptilian lizard men who had great influence over early humans and were immortalized by the first civilizations of Mesopotamia. Number 6. Advanced Inca design. The great city of Machu Picchu was built in the 15th century by the Inca. It became one of the main citadels of the Inca civilization and is located high up in the mountains in a seemingly impossible place to build such a monumental complex. One of the more mysterious things about Machu Picchu is that archaeologists aren't really sure why it was built. They think it could have been founded around 1450 and may have been built for the great Inca emperor Pachacuti. Around 100 years after it was constructed, it was abandoned. One of the most impressive things about the city is the fact that it was built on a mountain that suffers from severe weather events. It's a seismically active area, volatile with high winds, intense flooding, and frequent mudslides. It was the absolute worst place to build a structure of stone, and yet the Inca did it perfectly. The Inca were so brilliant that they knew exactly which materials to use to absorb floodwater while also being malleable enough to withstand seismic activity. How in the world they knew these things is beyond anyone's understanding. It seems crazy to think that the Inca just knew instinctively how to protect their buildings from an earthquake at the top of the mountain. Nonetheless, the wisdom was there, and the city still baffles and impresses scientists to this day. Number 5. Sound as a weapon. One of the most creative inventions of ancient humans had nothing to do with architecture at all. Sound as a weapon was an ingenious invention that's been used ever since human beings went to war with each other. Over the ages, we have created a myriad of ways to terrify our enemies using sound. It began with war cries. The very first barbarian warriors cried out as loudly as they could to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. As time went on, people developed more sophisticated ways of scaring people with their screams. There was the Carnyx, a Celtic war trumpet that made a horrific sound like a dragon shrieking. It was so effective against the Romans that they began using their own version themselves when riding into battle to intimidate their enemies. On the other side of the world in China, screaming arrows called xiaojian were created. These arrows made a very specific screeching sound when they were shot from horseback archers. It was a noise so stringent, it sounded like tormented ghosts were streaking across the battlefield. Number 4. War with the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are considered by many to be the ancient reptilian overlords who came down to Earth to spread wisdom and ingenuity to the human race. However, some believe the Anunnaki were evil. There is a theory that claims the Anunnaki used nuclear weapons thousands of years before Americans ever dropped bombs during World War II. Author and expert on ancient history Chris Hardy says the Anunnaki used nuclear weapons on 5 major cities in the Jordan Plain. This would result in the sudden and devastating end of the Sumerian civilization. The story of these explosions and the complete nuclear meltdowns of ancient cities can be found everywhere from the Book of Genesis to Mesopotamian clay tablets. There is even physical evidence in the form of atomic skeletons. The atomic skeletons were found in the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro, dated back to 2500 BC. The ancient city was rediscovered in the 1920s, and the whole place appears to have been obliterated by some kind of disaster. It looks as if an atomic blast went off, leveling the area and dissolving rocks at temperatures of thousands of degrees Fahrenheit. Skeletons discovered here supposedly give off radiation, which some believe is a lingering effect of a nuclear blast over 4,000 years ago. Number 3. China's Grand Canal System. Egypt and Mesopotamia were not the only places that may have been visited by the Anunnaki. China may have also been blessed by strange entities from beyond the atmosphere. We know this because just like other civilizations around the world, the Chinese civilizations very abruptly became engineering geniuses over 3,000 years ago. Mysterious sculptures of alien-like creatures have also been discovered in the lost city of Sanxingdui. They are depicted as beings with large eyes that look strangely reptilian. Maybe they were visited by the same creatures as the Sumerians. Or maybe it's all just one big coincidence. Whatever the case may be, China became very technologically advanced very quickly. One of their best works was the Grand Canal, a waterway that's been used consistently for 2,500 years. It still links several different Chinese cities and is currently the largest man-made waterway in the entire world. It's over 1,100 miles, something that would be a nightmare in today's age to build. The canal connects the Yellow River with the Yangtze River and passes through 4 Chinese provinces. It starts in Beijing and ends in the city of Hangzhou. People are amazed by the clever engineering and dedication it would have taken to build. Everyone remembers the Romans building similar things 2,000 years ago, but they weren't the only ones. And nobody thinks the Romans were helped by aliens. Number 2. The Anasazi Cannibals. The Anasazi, also known as the Pueblo people of the southwestern United States, occupied the Chaco Canyon region for over 2,000 years. Although they lived in the region for a good amount of time, they only really hit their stride in the year 850. Then, they mysteriously vanished off the face of the earth without a trace by the year 1250. To this very day, nobody knows why they suddenly disappeared or where they went. But there's another mystery here that sits in the forbidden chapters of American history. There is one site in particular that archaeologists find haunting. It's called Cowboy Wash, and it's a ruined Anasazi village where researchers came across 7 dead bodies. These corpses were shocking because they showed signs of cannibalism. The bodies were discovered in 1993 during a supervised archaeological survey looking to build a new irrigation system. The ancient Anasazi dwellings here date back to roughly 1125. Over 1,100 bone fragments were found from just about every single piece of the human body. Many of the bones were broken, and many appeared to have been munched on. Bioarchaeologist Patricia Lambert from Utah State University reconstructed the fragments into complete bodies. She believes they belong to 3 adult males, a single adult female, and 3 children as young as 7 years old. Their bones showed obvious signs of being cut apart. There were also knife marks on muscle attachment sites, evidence of tendons being sliced, and soft tissue being carved like one might carve a dead pig. The sick mystery is trying to figure out why 7 people were picked apart bone by bone and eaten. Scientists are still trying to learn if all of the Anasazi were cannibals or just those living in Cowboy Wash. Number 1. Advanced astronomy. Some of the oldest cave paintings in the world show an unbelievable knowledge of astronomy, and nobody is really sure why. Cave art across Europe shows star constellations in the night sky, and even events like comet impacts. There is also evidence in the cave paintings that suggest 40,000 years ago, Human beings were keeping track of time by watching how the stars slowly moved across the sky. It's a little confusing, and historians are doing their best to make sense of it. A group of researchers from the University of Edinburgh recently looked at cave art at sites in Spain, France, Germany, and Turkey. They discovered that every single site used the same method for tracking dates and time, all based on a sophisticated understanding of astronomy. This baffled the researchers because France is a world away from Turkey, and it's unlikely primitive humans would have had contact with one another at such a vast distance. The question then becomes, how did prehistoric humans, following the extinction of Neanderthals, learn how to read the stars and tell time? It's a complete anomaly, and so people have once again come up with the solution of the Anunnaki. There are some who believe the Anunnaki arrived on Earth 100,000 years ago, and then created human beings to be their genetic slaves. This would make sense why there were so many different kinds of hominins, as the Anunnaki tried to create the best animal possible. Then, once they had Homo sapiens and got rid of the Neanderthals, they started teaching us the ways of the universe and the mysteries of the stars. What do you think? Do you believe the Anunnaki existed? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!